Hey everybody, it's Mr. Von Holtz back with another lesson number 30 with you. I know more people are logging on to Google Classrooms and getting access to these videos and pushing their thinking with us, so I'm excited to dive into our lesson today. I'm trying a couple new things out, technology-wise and screen-wise, and so as we go through this journey together, I'm figuring new things out. Hopefully things are becoming easier, not just reading-wise, but computer-wise and video-wise. For you guys who are viewing and doing the work. And after the video, if you've seen it, if you have feedback, please comment on Google Classroom so that I can make this as streamlined for you and make it as helpful, impactful, and easy to understand. Today we're going to be diving into Chapter 9 of Toliver's Secret, also Lesson 30, and let's get right to it. Cool. So, what you're going to be looking at when you first begin is your lesson materials. Like I said, we're going to be doing lesson 30, pages 107 to 122. This lesson is, again, always assuming that you have read the chapter either on your own or watched the video with myself reading the chapter, and that you have a pretty good understanding of what has happened in the chapter thus far, or the big events that's happened in the chapter and what's happened previously in the story. Our objective today is, in the chapter, we're going to determine the theme in a story. And in a few moments, we're going to pop to another screen where I'll do a quick lesson and reminder of what theme is and how we can find it. And then we'll use that strategy and our thinking questions to guide us through so that we can accomplish that objective. The reason why we're doing this is, one, we enjoy reading and discussing things like this together, but primarily authors write fiction to express ideas about the world outside the text. Good readers look for details of plot, of characters and setting to offer clues to these themes, and this helps them better understand the story and the author's ideas about the world. Oftentimes fiction is called the lie that tells the truth. And what that means is that fiction stories are made up stories, and sometimes life is just so tricky that to learn a really clear lesson, to improve ourselves or improve our world or improve the lives around us, people actually make up stories to show these messages, to show these truths, so that we can better understand the world itself, and so we can enjoy the story a little bit more clearly than if it was real life and if things were a little bit more mixed up. This is my favorite part of reading fiction. It's what allows us to discuss. This is why we love stories, is because there's lessons in them that go back for ages, and we can discuss them for ages moving forward as well. So we're going to look more into exactly how we're going to do this in a moment, but first, as always, we'll go over vocabulary. We'll get our brains activated to what we're discussing today. The first word that you'll see is hubbub. It's a confusing mix of loud sounds such as voices or an uproar. Just a lot of loud noises. When you walk into the cafeteria at school, there's a lot of hubbub going on. Okay. Second word is orchards. It's lands planted with fruit or nut trees. When we went to Lynn Villa Orchards, that's where there was lots of trees planted that you could pick fruit from, that you could, fruit, and mostly fruit or nuts that hang from trees. Orchards aren't necessarily gardens. The word 3 is serene, which means calm and free from trouble. Picture someone relaxing in a hammock on the beach. They are serene. They are relaxed. They're calm. Nothing going on in their world. Number 4 is disapprovingly. It's an adverb. It's a manner that shows a lack of approval of someone or something. So when you're asked to clean the dishes and you don't quite get all the way done, you leave a few out, you might get a disapproving look saying, hey, you didn't do that job quite as well as you should. Not necessarily angry, more just like, it wasn't a great idea. Number 5, the word is dismounted. To get down from riding something, you'll see, or you already saw in this chapter, Ellen dismounts from a horse. She was riding the horse and then she got off of it. Dismounted just means get off of it. Defiant means showing no respect for authority, refusing to obey. It's exactly what it sounds like. Someone who is defiant. They are told to do something and they say, nope, I'm not going to do it. If any of you have small brothers and sisters, toddlers, they love doing this because they're figuring out the world. Number 7, the word is sheepfolds. And that's pens or shelters for sheep. It's where sheep live. And number 8, the word is not. Simply means nothing. It's a word that we don't typically use anymore, but still I think sounds interesting when you say it. That was not. Great. As I spoke before, we're going to, actually, never mind. jumping to our activation, just to get your brains ready. And this is one of those times when you'll have a chance to pause the video, write down what you think, and then come back to it. So today's chapter, Ellen must trust someone she meets. When have you had to trust someone you didn't know well? So go ahead and pause the video. And now that you're back, you could have written a whole bunch of different things. The one example that comes to my mind most is a doctor. Oftentimes we go to doctors, they give us shots, they have to draw our blood, we tell them personal information about ourselves, and they're sticking sharp needles in us sometimes. And we trust them with a lot of information, even though you only see them, if you're lucky, once a year. And so I think there's a lot of different examples when you sometimes have to trust people that you don't know so well. Sometimes it's a good idea, and sometimes it's not. Doctors usually a good idea. So, before we dive into our thinking questions to help guide us, I'm going to do a quick lesson on our objective, which again, reminder, is we're determining the theme in a story. In order to determine or to find a theme, we need to know what a theme is and a strategy or some ways to think about how to do that. There's a bunch of different strategies that you can use. The one that we're going to discuss today is called seed to theme. And so, check it out. Yeah, here's our objective. We're going to infer a theme from a text by using the seed to theme strategy. In order to do this, we need to know some key terms. Just one big one today. If you've had class with me, you know this one back and forth. We've done it 1,000 times. A theme is a deeper lesson or truth about life that everyone can use all the time to improve their life. It's a long definition, but it's an important one. A lot of times when people think they're finding themes, they're actually just finding ideas, not actually, or lessons that can be used in a particular situation. Good themes can be used for anyone at any time. Some examples of themes that we've talked about this year or that you've heard in your life likely are hard work pays off. We can accomplish more when we work together. And you've probably heard these things from many teachers, many wise people in your lives. These are lessons that as people go through life, they learn, and they often try to pass it on to younger people. So that's one way to think about a theme, is a lesson that you probably were told by your parents or maybe even someone wiser or older than them. These next three are themes that we've actually discussed in class a few times. Doing the right thing often requires sacrifice. We learned that when we read about Harriet Tubman. To do the right thing for her means she had to risk her life to go back and free other slaves from the South, but it was the right thing to do. When we read Love That Dog, we learned that the more you do something hard, the easier that things become. Jack really didn't like writing poetry in that book because it was really hard for him to begin with. He thought it was for girls, but then the more he did it, the easier it became and the better he became at it. And then one that we read recently, Hatchet, if you believe in yourself, you can accomplish anything. Brian was in an incredibly difficult situation, and at first he gave up on himself and didn't think he can survive. And you saw that he really struggled through that. But once he started to accomplish some hard things and believe in himself, he survived all the way through and actually was quite happy with himself at the end and had a lot more confidence. And so these are some examples of themes. And we look at these examples because when we go to find our own theme, it should sound something like this. These are all lessons that everyone can use all the time, and it makes their life better. Now, our strategy, seed to theme. Ignore the boxes, you'll see what they mean for a second. I'm still working on some of these fancy technology things. So, seed to theme might sound weird, but here's what I mean by it. Our goal is we're going to start with a small seed, but these seeds, actually, small seeds represent big ideas. I know, a little weird. And what I mean by big ideas are topics that can cover a whole bunch of different aspects of life. Things like, a big idea is that we will eventually grow into a theme. And these big ideas are things like truth, or freedom, or justice, or kindness, or growing up. These very, very, very large topics that you could say hundreds or thousands of things about. These big ideas that we notice in the text. And now, these are some giant ideas. How do we find these when we're reading? Well, one thing to do is notice repeated patterns of problems in a text. Mentioning Hatchet before, we noticed that Brian consistently had to believe in himself or he was not going to survive. Over and over again in many, many different chapters, that idea of confidence came up, and so that was an idea that we got that we could then grow into the theme. So noticing patterns of problems that happen over and over again. And now you can also notice topics or ideas that are brought up often in text. Not just problems, but also just ideas. If characters are talking about their freedom a bunch, or they're talking about sacrifice, if they're discussing this thought multiple times, that probably means the author is trying to show us something about that idea. Now, we have an idea about how to find these big ideas. How do we turn them into themes? Well, these are the ideas. So let's take instance freedom. The reason why we use this picture of a tree is because if you notice, there's lots and lots of branches that come off from a tree. And so I'm going to just take this one of big idea of freedom, and this idea of freedom can lead to hundreds of themes. And I'm just going to give an example of two. If people want to be free, they need to make sacrifices. Again, we learned that from Harriet Tubman. Another theme that's connected to freedom is if one person is not free, no one is. Right? Same big idea, two very different themes. And so that's what we mean by this growing into a theme. Once we find a big idea, we can find lots and lots of different themes from it, depending on what happens in the book. So the next logical question is, well, how do we grow a seed? How do we grow an idea into a theme? Well, here are some things that you can ask yourself and notice as you're reading. The first is, what does the character learn about themselves or the world? Oftentimes what the characters learn is what the author wants us to learn. You can also ask yourself, how does the character solve their problem? Or not. Right? If a character solves their problem in a smart way, we learn from that character. Oh, we can act like them. If they do something that doesn't solve their problem, then we can learn, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that thing. The example I like to use for this often is the three little pigs. The first two little pigs, they ended up dead because they didn't work very hard on their houses. So we learned if we don't work hard, you don't get what you want. But from the third little pig, he solved his problem. He built a house that took a long time out of bricks, but it stopped him from getting eaten by the wolf. So we learned from them, hard work pays off because the third little pig solved this problem in a smart way. We can also think, what character traits does a character show? Characters show good traits and good things happen to them, then we learn that those traits are good. If they show negative traits and bad things happen to them, then we learn that those traits are bad. If they show bad traits and then good things still happen, now that's interesting. But yes, looking at their character traits shows us a theme that we can, or helps us grow an idea into a theme. And then the last thing, we can notice how a character's perspective or their beliefs change. Oftentimes, again, when characters learn new things, their ideas or their beliefs about something, sometimes themselves, sometimes the world, it changes. And if we notice how their beliefs change or how their perspectives change, we can take what they learned and use it for ourselves, and our perspective might change as well. So, that is our seed to theme strategy, and that's what we're going to use today in Chapter 9 of Toliver's Secret to determine the theme. Let's get back to our worksheet. As in past videos, these thinking questions oftentimes will guide us right to our exit ticket and help us be successful. So let's take a quick look at our exit ticket, and then as we go through these, again, I'm going to ask you to pause the video to do your own work and your own thinking, and then when you're finished to restart the video, and I'll show you what kind of thinking, and it's definitely evidence from the text that helped you understand what you were doing, or that helped you find the solution to these problems. So let's go down and look at our exit ticket. Alright, this is the first time that we've had a multiple choice question, so we're just going to answer these selected responsive questions. It says, which statement best expresses the theme in this chapter? Alright, so that's what we're looking for, and these questions are going to help us to find the theme. So, here we go. First question says, what patterns do you see in this chapter? What are the important topics? And so this question is specifically guiding us to find these big ideas. What topics do we see repeated over and over again? Okay? And so, when I tell you to, pause the video, look into your text, see what you think is mentioned over and over again as an idea, or possibly a big theme that's throughout here. So I pause the video, and now that you're back, I want to, before we answer this question, give the caveat that anytime we're talking about theme, there can be for most chapters or books, there can be dozens, sometimes even hundreds of responses. And so as long as your thinking is in the right area and you've got evidence from the text to back it up, your response is going to be okay. I'm going to give some of the clearest ones, the best ones that I notice. And if you notice something different, again, as long as you can back it up with what you saw in the text, it's going to be an excellent response. So let's take a look at some of the patterns. Excuse me a moment while I switch and bring down the camera. Yeah. The pattern that I notice the most that's recognized is a few. I'm going to highlight them here. If you look on page 109, I think there's three things here that Ellen, the author, points out about Ellen. First, it mentions that there was no people anywhere, that she was in a strange place, not like Island. The people there had been friendly, and where she is now, New Jersey was different. There was nothing to do now but to just keep marching along by herself. And I believe that this shows that unlike her last time that she had to walk 10 miles, she was all alone. Right. Over and over again, it's place that she's alone, that she is doing something challenging. She's walking these 10 miles by herself, different than what she did in the past. Right. Something else that it's repeated, and again, excuse the funky camera work, is here on page 110 and 111, the bottom. It shows her having a conversation with herself. She says, "I can't do it. I can't go on. But you must do it, Ellen. I can't. I'm only 10. A courier is waiting for your message. I can't. I won't." So it's her having a conversation with herself where she's telling herself she can't do this, but then also arguing that she can. She has to. And then over here, lastly, it's repeated again. These words from Higgins that she found. "Well, then there's something hard to be done," she said at last. "Just square your shoulders and start." Okay. So we see here that from pages 109 that she had something to do hard and alone, and that she's not sure she can do it, but she says she has to, even if she doesn't want to. And we see that again later on in the chapter. If you go to page 115, Ellen, this is when Mr. Murdoch and first picks up Ellen and tells her to climb up on the horse. Ellen says, "How do I climb up?" "Never been on a horse before?" cried the man in surprise. "A big boy like you?" And she says, "No." Again, this shows that she's doing something that's hard, something that she's never done before, something that's a challenge, but she's doing it anyway. And so this becomes a pattern where we repeatedly see her doing something that's hard, that's a challenge, but trying to do it anyway. It happens a few other times that I don't need to point out in the text, like when she drops the bread, she picks it up from the cold water, which again, it was dangerous, it was scary, it was slippery, but she decided to do it anyway. And so I see that pattern over and over again. That's what I'm going to put here. So repeatedly, it says what patterns you see in this chapter. This is how I answer it. Repeatedly, lowercase letter. Repeatedly, Ellen, I didn't spell it right. Oh, this is bad. There we go. Bad, Mr. Ronald. Sorry. Ellen has to face things that are challenging for her. Give some examples, like getting on a horse for the first time, and walking through the forest. By herself. It's just things that are a challenge for her, but she does them anyway. So to me, that brings up this important topic of courage and bravery, which shows the idea of courage and bravery. All right, excellent. So, moving on, the next question asks, what lessons does Ellen learn about herself in this chapter? And what does she learn about others? There's these two questions are both in here because I think each one actually kind of guides us to two different themes. If we look here, if we're taking this idea of bravery or courage, a way to grow into a theme is to what character traits does the character show? Or how does the character solve their problem? Or what does the character learn about themselves or the world? Okay? How we answer that will change the way that our theme goes. Okay? And so when you're doing this, think about what she learns about herself, but also think what she learns about others. Okay? Take however long you need now, pause the video. When you come back, we'll discuss it. All right, now that we're back, let's take a look at what she learns about herself. Okay, I'm going to switch again to my camera. I was on my camera the whole time, wasn't I? I'm going to go back here for a second just to make sure that you can see what I put. I may have been on my camera wrong. I apologize, everybody. At least you got to hear me talk. Right. Now, I'll go back to just the camera so you can see what the text is. We're all figuring this out. Great. Something that she learned about herself, I think the best evidence that shows this is on page 112. Right here. It says, "The forest was beautiful, and Ellen was no longer afraid of it. As she trotted along, she realized she no longer was fearful at all." And she learned that she could do hard things and scary things if she put her mind to it. And I think that's pretty clear. She had a lot of hard things to do. She learned that she can do them if she believes in it and she keeps on trying. I think she also learned just how brave she is down on page 116. Oh, not 116. 118. This is right after she drops the bread in the water. She says she didn't stop to wonder about the slippery rocks or how deep the water might be. She waded into the stream up to her knees until she could scoop up her bundle. And so I think the key line here is she didn't stop. So she didn't even stop to wonder at all. She just did it immediately. So she learned about herself that she is brave and that she can do hard things as long as she puts her mind to it. As far as the second part of the question, what she learned about other people, I think this will lead to a slightly different theme, but I still want to discuss it. I think she learned that people aren't always what they appear to be. Here, Mr. Murdoch picked her up and appeared to be kindly, or appeared to be kind of scary at first. She was frightened. I guess I can show that with page 113. When he first rode up, she slipped behind a pine tree. She was hiding from him. "Why are you hiding there, boy?" Okay. But as she goes along, she realized she doesn't need to be as afraid of him completely. She couldn't guess whether he was for the British or the Patriots, but then later, when he starts shouting about it, she learns that he is indeed a patriot. But he learns here, Mr. Murdoch turned and looked back at her suspiciously. "You're a queer one," he said. "You got something inside that bread?" Right. He's asking her a question that he doesn't completely trust her. And then she says, "I get a whipping with a birch rod if I lost it." Now, she might be in trouble if she lost it, but she never mentioned about getting a whipping. She's more worried just about letting her grandfather down. And so she's lying to him. So I think she learns that even if people are on your side, you might not always need to trust them right away. So, there we go, camera back. We're getting the hang of this. Back to the computer screen. Cool. Let's put what we thought. Ellen learns, let's separate a little bit so you can see it. Ellen learns that she is brave and can do difficult things as long as she keeps trying. She no longer fears the woods after she comes out of it, and she doesn't hesitate to get her bread out of the water when she drops it. Okay. And then what she learns about others, she learns that sometimes you might have to trust people you don't know when you need their help. She doesn't know what side Murdoch is on, but she takes the ride to his home because otherwise she would let her grandfather down. And I figure we'll type it out. He is suspicious of her, and she of him, but they still help each other. So strong. So there we go. She doesn't know. Let's fix that up. All right. Now, third question says, what is one message the author has about trust? And so going back to our strategy, we found these. One idea that was brought up a few times was trust. So that would be our big idea. We asked ourselves what the character learns about themselves, the world. Or also, now we're asking what the author is telling us about trust. And so that's kind of driving us to a theme about trust. And if we look back at what we already answered, she learns that sometimes you might have to trust people you don't know if you need their help. Isn't that kind of a lesson that everyone can use? I mean, if we were in class, I know we'd have a debate about this, about whether or not we can trust people that we don't know. But sometimes it's the case, or all the time it's the case, that sometimes you might have to trust people that you don't know if you need their help. Ellen learns this about Mr. Murdoch, and if we use this in our lives, it's something that can be improved. Now, the lesson is not always trust everybody. That's not what she learns. She learns that she has to trust Mr. Murdoch a little bit so that she can have his help. Okay, so I think that's the message the author is trying to tell us about trust. Okay, the author is showing us sometimes we have to trust people we don't know very well because we need their help. And then let's explain how Ellen does this. Ellen does this by riding with Mr. Murdoch, even though she is uncertain about whose side he is on. Great. And so question number, that's a good response enough. And you'll notice that I'm not quoting direct evidence from the text when I'm answering these. I'm trying to show you the direct evidence from the text, and then when it comes time to type them, we'll save that for the exit ticket, just to make sure these videos are a manageable length of time. If you want to add your own evidence from the text, that's marvelous. You're pushing yourself to do even better. Great. Last question, and let's read it really quickly. It says, what does the author want you to know about Ellen when she wades into the cold water to get her bread? This, I think, is a great example of taking this seed idea of trust, possibly, and then asking ourselves different questions to grow into different themes. Okay? When we ask what she learned about others, about when it comes to trust, learn that you have to sometimes trust people that you don't always believe in, or know all the way about in order to accomplish your goal. But now we're asking, what did she learn about herself? And when we ask that question, we might end up with a different theme, which is fine. These big ideas can grow into lots and lots of different themes. So in a moment, pause the video and write what you think. Now that you're back, I think he wants us to know that Ellen is brave, is that she can do hard things even if she's scared. We've mentioned this quite a few times before. And in a moment, I think that idea will lead us to our theme. So let's put it down. The author wants us to know that Ellen is brave and will risk herself for the cause that she believes in. I think this last part is important. If we dive into all of the different reasons why she's doing the hard things. Sorry, not all the reasons, all the different hard things that she does, and think about the reason why she's doing it. It's all because she wants to accomplish this mission of delivering the bread. She goes into the woods even though she's scared because she wants to deliver the bread. She gets on a horse with a man that she doesn't know because she wants to deliver the bread. When the bread falls in the water, she goes and gets it even though it's freezing and dangerous because she wants to deliver the bread. She wants to help out the patriots. And so I think the author is trying to show us that when you believe in something bigger than yourself, that you can be brave and accomplish things you wouldn't think that she wants to accomplish. There. Let's put that down. Ellen is able to do all of these challenging things because she wants to help the patriots. That's the big one. She wants to help the patriots and believes in a cause bigger than just herself. All right. Now, something that I always get a little not upset, but it's tricky with when it comes to themes and multiple choice questions. If you were to take what we just discussed and turn it into a theme, you might come up with a whole bunch of different things. But with multiple choice, we have to choose the one that makes the most sense. And so, right now, I want you to stop the video, take your time to answer these two questions on your own, and then check back in so that you can hear the thinking that went behind these two questions and why we selected the answer that we selected. So, now that you're back, let's take a look at each one of these choices, decide if they're even a theme at all, and if they are a theme, which is the best one. Right. So the first one says, it is silly to be afraid of the woods. I'd roughly call that a theme. It's not really a lesson that everyone can use, but it's very, very specific to this story or stories about woods. And so I'm thinking that that's probably not a good theme. And even though she did realize it was silly to be afraid of the woods, it's not a lesson that everyone can use, so I don't think that's the best choice. The second says we should never explore new things if we are scared. Ellen does exactly the opposite here. She's afraid to go into the woods, but she goes in anyway. So that's not being shown here. That might be a theme. It's a lesson that it applies to everybody, but I don't think it necessarily improves anyone's lives, and it's also not what Ellen showed. Okay. This one here is, there is no reason to hide from things that seem dangerous. Now, if you thought that was a theme, that it's a lesson that makes sense. It seems like it can apply to everybody, and Ellen does show it when she was running through the woods, or she was getting the bread. There was, if she hid, she wouldn't have accomplished her goal. But she did have some reasons for it. It's okay to be afraid of people that you didn't know, and the woods, if she was traveling through them, were dangerous, and so she had a reason to fear for her life. And so this makes a little bit of sense, but it's not completely clear that this is what the author is actually trying to show. And so I think when we look at this last one, sometimes we have to overcome our fears to help a bigger cause. This is really, really clear that this is what the author is showing. All throughout the chapter, she is overcoming her fears. She was afraid of the woods, and she goes through it. She was afraid of meeting this new man and getting help from him, but she did it anyway. She was afraid of the cold water for the bread, but she did it anyway. Actually, by that point, she wasn't even afraid of the water, but she had already overcome them. And again, the reason why she was overcome it, because she was helping a bigger cause. She wanted the Patriots to win the war. And so D is certainly the best choice for this one. So you can let's look at that choice. And now, how does Ellen learn this theme? Okay. She realizes that the only way to get to Elizabethtown is through the woods. That makes a lot of sense. She learns that even though the woods are scary, she has to go through it to accomplish her goal. And so that might be a good choice. Let's stick with it. Mark it for now, and let's go through the rest. She makes it through the woods with no problem. Not entirely true. She has quite a few problems. She's really, really afraid. She loses her bread. Soldiers pass by, and Mr. Murdoch accidentally knocks her off her horse. And so there's definitely problems. This isn't just true. She realized the woods are very similar to ones at home. We know that's not true because she specifically said that the woods in New Jersey were different than the woods on Long Island. And then she's afraid of Mr. Murdoch, but he teaches her that the woods are safe. Now, I think we could be tempted to do this, but if as you go back in the chapter, there's no point. Mr. Murdoch is almost completely silent the entire time, and the only thing he says to her is about her bread and about where she's going, not anything that about being safe. He even actually says, you should ride with me because these woods aren't safe after dark. And so this one actually doesn't match up as well. And so the best choice of how she learns this is that she has to go through the woods to get to Elizabethtown. That's how she's going to help a bigger cause. So choice A would be the best choice for that. If you chose the 2 correct ones, excellent. If you did not, when it comes time for our live Zoom meetings, this might be something that you seek help on, and that's something that we could talk about. Okay. Let's end with some closing thoughts. I'm not going to type this out, but you can pause and think about it, write it down. How does Ellen fight for freedom on the road to Elizabethtown? And nudge back. Again, this is kind of just tying in our whole theme with this book, is that sometimes fighting for freedom doesn't actually mean joining the war. She's fighting for freedom by facing her fears, by continuing to make sure that this message is safe, and putting herself at risk in different challenging situations, things that she's afraid of, and overcoming those fears to help out the Patriot cause. Excellent. I hope some of the new technology pieces that came up were helpful. I hope the strategy lesson was helpful as well. It's a strategy that you can use all the time for figuring out themes, and we'll continue to use it a couple more times throughout this book, and many times when we dive into our next book in Report Period 4, or our online report period. As always, if you have questions, come to our Zoom meetings. I'll be having mine on Mondays and Fridays at 2 o'clock. And be safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the next lesson.